Now I'm recording.
Okay. Thank you so much, Curtis, for joining us tonight for the Brooklyn Tea Party Zoom meeting. Um, Before we start, just want to go over a couple ground rules for the audience that might have just joined us. We're going to do a Q&A session with Curtis. I'm going to be asking some questions, and then the board of directors from the Brooklyn Tea Party, if they have any questions that I did not cover, we'll ask some questions to Curtis. And then from there, we're going to use the message board section of the Zoom feature right here to have the audience type in their questions if we have some time and have the questions asked to Curtis. All right, so before we start, let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I have the pledge right here. All right, there you go. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the
to
flag
The flag
of the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Curtis, for joining us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great honor to introduce you, Curtis Sliwa, who's a Republican candidate for New York City for mayor. He is running in the June 22nd primary against Fernando Mateo. We had Fernando on our last meeting in April, on April 19th. So we would like to thank Curtis for joining us tonight. And Curtis, thank you again for joining us. I just wanted to ask you, why don't you just, before we start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and where you came from and what got you to this level.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Tea Party for inviting me to your forum here because it doesn't matter which Republican you are at any level, there is a dearth of information about the mayor's race, the race for city controller, the city councilmanic races, and that is an absolute disgrace. You see a tsunami of attention for the Democrats, and not just at the mayoral level, but at all levels, the controller level and the city council levels. So any opportunity to be able to address the issues has to be welcomed by any Republican. Number one, you got me right before I'm going on a 24-hour subway tour, something that I've been doing since I was 5 years old in Canarsie, Brooklyn, on what was the LL train, lousy line back then. And when the hipsters and millennials took over Northern Brooklyn, it became the L train and had incredible service. When I was riding it as a 5-year-old in the 60s, it stunk out the joint. But pretty much I've had a baptism in the subways. And if there was one area alone that Curtis Sliwa is an expert on, that all the other candidates, Republican or Democrats, are not, it's the subways, the problems in the subways, how to deal with the subways. Because back in 1979, I was the night manager of Mickey D's up in the Bronx. And this was a time that the Bronx was burning. There was arson. People were fleeing. In fact, a lot of people don't realize in the 1970s, 1 million New York City residents fled, many of them from the Bronx. And those who didn't have the wherewithal, they just hunkered down. They put more bars on the windows, locks on the doors, and they started turning Fifi, the French poodle friend of men and women, into King, the pit bull terrier. But when the sun came down, that's it. They didn't go out. The cops were not around, and the gangbangers ruled. And I had to manage a McDonald's at night. Difficult under normal circumstances, just total anarchy at night. So I had to be law and order. I had to hire a crew. I had to deal with riding in from Brooklyn. And while coming in from Brooklyn, I was living in Brownsville, never ran, never will at the time. I'd have to take the number 2 train all the way up to the Bronx. And I'd see young men on the trains who were wearing their Kango hats. They were wearing their sheepskin coats. They had their names on their belts. And they'd be coming through and saying, yo, Manhattan makes it and Brooklyn takes it. And then they'd be eye-fornicating me and mad-dogging me because I had my Mickey D's jacket on with the golden arches. And to them, it was like Christmas. So it was a question of, do I just sit here and be sucker punched? or do I launch a preemptive strike? So I had to launch a preemptive strike because there were no cops around. This is at a time where there was fiscal cutbacks in the budget. We were on the brink of bankruptcy, very similar to the kind of problems we're running into now economically and also in terms of crime. And so from that, having to survive on the trains, out in the streets, in the McDonald's itself, I said, I gotta do something. I can't just sit down here and grow barnacles on my backside while people with wherewithal leave. So I organized my closing crew to actually begin patrolling the subways with me at night. So from approximately about 1 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, the off-peak hours. And it was with a lot of success, but also a lot of vitriol that was directed towards us because at that time, Ed Koch was mayor. The police thought we were a threat to their job security. They thought we were the Hells Angels, vigilantes, Charles Bronson in Death Wish, Buford Pusher, Walking Tall, De Niro, and Taxi Driver, which were the vigilante movies of that era.
Right.
And we were none of that. But the cops were hell-bent on derailing us. And imagine in the first 13 years, I got locked up 76 times. So I like hearing all these Democrats, socialists, they're talking about AOC, all out crazy, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, how we need to close Rikers Island, have community prisons. Well, I don't think anybody running for office has been locked up in every one of those, quote, community prisons, Bronx House, Brooklyn House, Queens House, Rikers, the Tombs. At times, I almost had my own cell there because I was getting a wooden shampoo, a concrete facial, and attitudinal readjustments from cops who just didn't understand what we were doing. And then Rudy Giuliani came for a second try at unseating David Dinkins, who had just previously been elected. And thank God he barely won and gave this city a badly needed colonic. And with that, he embraced the guardian angels. He said, no more. None of this criticism and attacks of the guardian angels. They're the best of what New York City young people can do. And from that day forward, we never had a problem with the NYPD. In fact, many guardian angels went on to become police officers, correctional officers, social workers, teachers, but had that street cred from being a guardian angel volunteer. And we're now in 13 countries and 130 cities. So I have to manage an international nonprofit organization that helps the police and public safety wherever they are as guardian angels. And so that's my credibility when it comes to the number one issue now. You may have seen, yes, the Democrats have had an epiphany. Yeah. In the most recent polls, it's no longer police reform, defund the police. Democrats, most of them moderate Democrats, have basically said, no, we're not going to follow AOC all out crazy, who wants to defund the police by $3 billion, not $1 billion. They're now into refunding the police. And I go a step beyond that. I not only want to refund the police, and I've been saying this consistently since I was battling the shooters and looters in the streets of New York City in June, when total anarchy prevailed, and Mayor de Blasio, Comrade de Blasio, as I call him, the part-time mayor, the dope from Park Slope, decided to force the police to stand down. And I and the guardian angels were out there battling them on a regular basis. I broke my jaw. Other guardian angels were seriously injured, but we didn't surrender. We didn't retreat. And we knew it wasn't the police who had forsaken us. It was de Blasio and members of the city council who had neutered the police, who had rendered them impotent. So I want to hire an additional 3,000 cops. And people say, well, how are you going to hire 3,000 cops? De Blasio is going to leave the next mayor with a $3 billion debt, which is true. Well, the way you do it is you go after those who don't pay any property tax. Madison Square Garden, Columbia University, which sits on an $11 billion endowment, yet like a Pac-Man, Pac-Woman is buying up all the property. Same thing, NYU, $5 billion endowment, buying up all the property in Greenwich Village, taking it off the commercial property tax rolls. Then there's Rockefeller Medical, there's Cornell Medical, sitting on billions of dollars. They don't pay a penny in property tax. So that's how you can refund the police and hire an additional 3,000 cops to give you 38,000 on the force, which is what Rudy Giuliani had when he came into office and utilized them so effectively to take back our city. And it's a dedicated tax. So it's only going to the hiring and training of police. I'm the only one who actually explains how you refund the police to tune of $1 billion and hire more police. And as I've said, it's public safety, because if you don't have safe streets, safe subways, safe parks, safe schools, this city cannot recover. Look at the slew of crimes in the subway, the slashings, the assaults, the push-ins, the rapes, the robberies, the murders. I mean, who's going to take a subway if they don't absolutely have to, if they're not an essential worker? You're never going to convince people to come back and work in these empty spirals of concrete, glass, and steel. How are we going to attract tourists when they read about 3 people visiting, one a 4-year-old who gets shot right in the middle of Times Square? And the dope from Park Slope says, oh, here, tourists will come. Oh, crime is down in the subways and the streets. This guy is a stunat. You know what it's from? I can tell you. Being on that back porch at Gracie Mansion each night with Charlene, smoking that Maui Wowie and Hindu Kush. There is no doubt about it. But it's not just crime. Let's take the next issue. It has to do with education and leveling the playing field so that every child has an opportunity to improve themselves from their parents or parents' generation. So let's take public schools first.
Yeah.
Out of a $99 billion budget, because, you know, de Blasio just hiked it by $7 billion, but wouldn't refund the police. I mean, is that chutzpah? Is that Cooliones? Is that Huevos? Of course it is.
Yes.
Meantime, there's a $30 billion budget for the DOE. The acronym stands for dumbest organization ever. Carranza, now Parsons. You saw the whole flap over Columbus Day. Yep. The mayor took the code of Omerta. I know nothing. I see nothing, like Sergeant Schultz in Stalag 13. And yet you knew these plans had been in effect to not only take down the Columbus statues, and I don't know if you know there are 4 statues in New York City. Most people don't know that.
Well, don't let the other people know. Then they'll want to take those all down.
Exactly. But they want to take them down. They've already vandalized some. They've desecrated some. And now they want to take the curriculum right out of the school to not even teach the children Columbus Day. And they want to eradicate Columbus Day itself and replace it with an indigenous Native American Indian holiday. I don't have a problem with teaching about indigenous peoples.
Sure.
But the problem is we don't teach history, period, in the schools.
That's correct.
There's almost no history taught. And now there's revisionist history in which they're changing the history of the greatest nation that ever came about in the face of the earth. Good and bad points along. I certainly learned about that in public school and parochial school. But they want to eliminate all that.
Right.
And they want to make people feel guilty.
Oh.
They want to make people say, oh, your complexion is not your protection.
Right.
You're a Caucasoid. You're a Caucasian. Oh, you have white privilege. Take a knee. Take a knee. No. Wait a second. We're all equal. So number one, Department of Education, there's one thing I agree with Scott Stringer, who the other day in front of the UFT, that Mamalut, that Mashad, actually said something that was quite bright. So we got to destroy the DOE as we know it today, because most of the money gets sucked up by that bureaucracy. It doesn't go into the classroom. Do you realize teachers are having to spend $250 more of their own personal money to get basic supplies for their children? The things that we were supplied with when we went to school, whether it was parochial school or public school. Now, that is what I call, where I grew up in Canarsie, udisgraziata. If you were Jewish, it's a shanda.
Yes.
Yet, where does all that money go? So that has to be dealt with. Now, the specialty tests, they have to be kept for young people who are able to earn their way into Staten Island Tech, Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, Bronx High School of Science, and Townsend in Queens. And because Asians are doing so well, 70% of them are in these elite schools. Now they want to put a cap on it.
Right.
They basically want to penalize Asian children and their families for playing by the rules and trying to live the American dream.
Right.
Well, guess what? That ain't happening when I'm mayor of the city of New York. And gifted and talented, I'm very familiar with the gifted and talented program. My 2 youngest sons, Carter and Hunter, tried out for it, were not accepted. There were Asian kids who were accepted instead. Why? Because they were doing better academically. They had a better IQ, and they answered the questions much better than my sons, Carter and Hunter. Yet my sons, Carter and Hunter, still go to a good public school in Queens. So on those two levels, we're going to keep what it is and just expand more gifted and talented schools. Maybe create more excellent academic high schools. But what is missing in the conversation is what is going to prevent young people from slipping through the cracks.
Right.
Because when I went to school, they had 3 Regents tests. Now they got 5. I had a hard enough time with 1 Regent test.
I know, I remember.
My cousins, Joey G, the Cheech from Howard Beach, Lenny Beans Biangino, Crazy Sal, Crazy Joe, Crazy Vinny, the whole group of them, the Jadruls, the Knuckle Draggers. If it hadn't been for vocational training in high school, East New York High School, Westinghouse High School, some of the other vocational high schools they went to, guaranteed you some of them will be doing triple life without parole. They got a skill. They became carpenters, electricians, plumbers. Nowadays, you have computer programming. A third of the computer programmers haven't even gone to college. What they do is they go to professional schools after high school, and we got to pay through Pell Grants, which, if you know anything about the federal Pell Grant, it's a total ripoff. But at least these young people are getting a negotiable skill. And, you know, you're not in this category. I'm 67, but soon, you know, I'm going to have somebody changing my bedpan, a home healthcare aide. And they have to have more skills now because of all the problems that older people are having. And it's a lot cheaper and better for an elderly person to be in their own home, their own apartment, than to be stuck in an Andrew Cuomo long-term care unit for the elderly, in which there's a pretty good chance you're going to get euthanized. I mean, by the fiat and decision of Cuomo. So that's one thing. Charter schools, I'm a supporter of charter schools, but charter schools are going to have to understand, like Catholic schools and parochial schools, that if you have misbehaving kids or kids who are not functioning well, you cannot just kick them out and then they become the problem of a public school. Oh, no. When I went to public school, we had, for my cousins, the 600 schools.
Oh, yeah.
We call them now special ed.
Right.
I call them knucklehead schools because these were kids who just wouldn't cooperate. They were discipline problems. It wasn't a problem of their mental or physical functions. It was simply that they were incorrigible, but there was a place for them to get an education. Charter schools are going to have to do that. Parochial schools are going to have to do that. For parochial schools, I want to reward them because they were the only ones, not the public, not the charter schools, the only ones to stay open during the pandemic and have in-classroom training with teachers and children there. We need to give the parents or guardians an opportunity at vouchers, tuition tax credits. Absolutely. And having been a product of both public and parochial schools, when actually some of the public schools were better than the parochial schools, I know the differences, but we gotta create school choice because it's the only way to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And then we talk about the Thrive program. Slowly I turn, step by step. Where's that $1.25 billion, my little pretty Charlene? And Bill de Blasio?
Yes, for the homeless. Right. What did you do?
That's right. And when I'm mayor, because they just changed the name, they did what I call little tricknology. You know, when you have a bad product, you change the name and you still try to bamboozle everyone.
Right.
Change the name. They have a $225 million budget now. I'm going to have a Department of Investigation, complete subpoena system. Want to see the books? Want to do the spreadsheets? Because none of the Democrats ever use their subpoena power. And I can't wait till the indictments come down and try to follow the tax dollars to either the Cayman Islands, Panama, or Switzerland, because I'm out in the streets with the emotionally disturbed every day. Guess what? I've never run across an intervention worker from Thrive. Other city agencies, yes, never Thrive. It's a placebo. It is a non-existent organization, and the Democrats, shame on them, because these emotionally disturbed men and women, they need to physically be removed from the streets, subways, and parks, put into psychiatric institutions where they can get their medication and they can become whole again. Right. And then the homeless, the many homeless. Hey, I don't know if you're aware, but New York City is the only one under a federal court order that if I happen to, let's say, pound the hound and come in from Camden, New Jersey or Philadelphia, and I end up in the Port Authority, I can declare I'm indigent. I don't have a means of support. I have no medical program. I need 3 hots and a cot. And guess what? By federal dictate, we have to provide it. So would you want to stay in Philadelphia or Camden in a broken down shelter where basically you're sharing, a cot with cockroaches and worse? Or would you want to come to New York City where you could end up in a COVID-19 hotel at $175 a night in Midtown Manhattan and get 3 squares, have a nice place to stay, your own room at sucker taxpayers' expense? All of that is going to end. Yep. And in the shelters that do exist, there need to be programs, because a lot of these men and women, they come with serious addictive problems to alcohol, drugs, emotional issues that have to be tended with. These shelters are just warehouses. I don't know if any of you have ever been in one, but you got to be in at curfew at 10. Right. You lose your bed, you come back the next night, you get a different bed, and they kick you out at 7 in the morning. No programs, and you roam the streets of the neighborhood where Bill de Blasio overnight shoved the shelter down your throat. No transparency, no discussion with the community board, elected officials, tough noogies. You're stuck with a homeless shelter, and it has caused a deterioration of the quality of life. That's going to stop. So if you look at those 3 programs that I've mentioned, all of them are main problems that plague our society. And then naturally, you look at the small businesses that have been forced to close.
Yes.
The massive amount of commercial property that is available. Some people say, let's repurpose it and create affordable housing. I'm not giving up on business. Guess what, AOC, all out crazy, and all of your sycophants, toadies, and lackeys? We are the land of capitalism, the home of the free, the home of the brave, where free speech prevails, not a cancel culture. If you don't like hate speech, the answer, more free speech. If you don't like certain statues, the answer, build more statues. But this is capitalism. This is what has made America and the city of New York the economic engine of the world, the place that so many millions have come to enjoy the freedoms that we take for granted. And as mayor, I'm going to protect it. But I'm going to give every man and woman out there the right to business program. That means you see an empty space, you let market forces kick in. It's like Monty Hall. Remember, let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal.
The mortgage holders, you got the landlords, you got the tenants, residential or commercial. You all sit down. You let the market forces establish the going rate, because there's way too much supply and not enough demand. And you keep government out of the whole process. But for those men and women who want for the first time to get into business, this is what you do. You say, I'm going to help you, guy and gal, out of City Hall. I'm not going to just throw money at you. What I got to do is cut through the bureaucracy for you, because that's the impediment. We've got fees, we've got fines, we've got permits, we've got licenses. My, your head is spinning as if all of a sudden you're Dorothy stuck in that tornado, and the next thing you know, you're in Kansas clicking your heels with Toto. We need an easy pass approach. Micro loans, get the men and women up and organized in business. I want to see business thriving. I don't just want to see repurposed space for residential housing. Some of that, yes, but not to the extent that people were talking. And then the big issue, how do we stem the flow of those that we love, our friends, relatives, and neighbors who are fleeing? And don't lie, I know at night, many of you, you're on the computer.
Yes.
You're saying, oh my God, no property taxes, no income tax. Look, 1.5 acres. Wow, great quality of life, good public schools. Florida is like pulling at you.
I know tax on your pension too.
That's right. All of a sudden, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, it's come.
Don't vote Democrat down there and destroy Florida and turn it into New York, right?
And all I'm saying is the one group that I don't want to flee are people like me. I'm 67, so 65 plus, many of them who believe improve, don't move. They're the last to go.
Right.
They're not going to leave, because as long as the figs grow on the fig tree, they're not leaving. That's how it was on the Italian-American side of my family. Fidel Bianchino said, as long as the figs grow on the tree, we ain't leaving Canarsie.
You're back there as long as the figs grow on the tree.
Right. So the point being is, if you're 65 or older and you have a house and you earn $75,000 or less, guess what? No property tax for you, because I want you to stay in New York and live the dream, which was always to turn over the house to your children or your grandchildren and carry on the tradition. So that sort of gives you a bit of a thumbnail sketch of the kind of mayor I would be. The other thing is, the day I get into office, I take every one of those freaking lobbyists, I kick them in their ass, and I tell them, don't tread on these steps any longer. You are not going to be whining, dining, and pocket lining all the crooked politicians who are making deals to your benefit. Out of City Hall, out of the offices of the city council. You're banned for life, because that's such a drain on our city.
Right.
And most importantly, we're going to return patriotic pride. Mandatory in the classroom, Pledge of Allegiance, just like you had.
Yep.
Singing the national anthem, learning about American history, learning about civics,
Right.
which I remember I had one class every week in which I learned about the purpose of government, what was the borough president, what was the district attorney. Nowadays, they have very little history and no civics. I am going to demand that, since it's the taxpayers who pay for the public school system and charter school system, and under my plan, will be paying some with the vouchers and tuition tax credits, that you will have American history and you will have civics and you will show patriotic pride.
Oh,
that was just thumbnail sketch. I could go on.
Curtis, you basically answered almost all the questions I was going to ask you tonight. So good job. I have a couple more, if you don't mind. What are you for or against the vaccine passports, and do you believe that the citizens have the right to choose their own healthcare choice, just like a woman has a right to choose when it comes for abortion? My body, my choice, as they say. And do you think that the city should force workers to have the vaccine to continue to work at their jobs?
Did you see the Democratic
No.
Northfest debate the other night?
I couldn't drag myself to be tortured that way.
All of them said, oh, the little kiddies all need to be vaccinated if you're going to go to school.
Yeah.
I said, kids are least likely to get the coronavirus.
Right.
But the teachers, no. I think 6 out of the 8 said, heavens to Betsy, no. So that meant Michael Mulgrew, who is the real mayor of the city of New York, and they were marionettes. It's like, no. Wait a second. Yes to the kids, no to the teachers. That's nuts. I am completely opposed to a vaccine passport. That is so un-American. First of all, we're reaching herd immunity. Right. Even Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo earlier today finally had to say, yeah, the CDC is right. You won't have to wear masks indoors if you've been vaccinated. By the way, can I take a moment to salute Andrew on the fact that he just made $5 million on that book?
5.1.
Leadership.
Yeah, 5.1 million. Congratulations, Andrew.
Well, let me give him my salute. I used to give him and his father Mario on the radio over the years. Andrew, ascendame, tu siu provinos facim, and like your father Mario, you are, but you are a dua faccia. I give you the malukia. Can you believe what he has just done? $5 million.
It's disgusting. It is totally disgusting to see how this guy, all of a sudden, he's like a smoke and mirrors operation that he runs. Hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. And all of a sudden, the scandal that was brewing about him disappears. Why did it disappear? Why is it so silent? If it was a Republican, it would be 24/7 news cycle, and it won't end until they drag him out of office kicking and screaming. What the heck is going on there with that? That's, I guess, we'll soon sit back and...
But wait. You know what I love? Any of you who've grown up in an Italian-American household, his excuse for being a perv. Oh, we kiss on the cheeks. We grab, we cop a feel.
Oh.
What the hell is he talking about? My grandfather, Fidel Bianchino, said, no, you don't touch women.
Right.
No. You don't touch women at all.
Right.
Stay away. Show respect. Respect one young. Fatally factor too. It's a fora que sacais. I used to get that while he had the nobly crooked cigar in his mouth. Oh my, oh my. I'll never forget that.
Oh Lord, yeah, I know it's totally disgusting with Andrew Cuomo. I remember doing the salute to his father on the Bob Grant show. I did that.
My mentor, my hero, the reason I got into talk radio was Bob Grant. That little side story.
Yeah.
The Stoots, the mockers, the shot callers at WABC said, "Hey, Bob, you have Curtis on the air when you go on vacation?" Because he used to love to go and snore on the cruises.
Yes.
And he said, "Curtis knows where all the bones are buried and who buried them." And at the time, he was Mr. Radio. So that's how I got the job at WABC. If it had been up to the Suits, I'd be hanging wallpaper somewhere in the 5 boroughs of the city of New York.
Well, we do miss Bob. He was a tremendous force in our city and our state of New York, and we certainly do miss him. And I met him a couple of times, and he was nothing more than a gentleman. Well, Curtis, what would you do to reform our city agencies? For an example, you touched upon the property taxes and such, but store owners and landlords, for example, they passed, and I got a letter in the mail the other day, a couple of weeks back, talking about local law 152. I don't know if you know about this, but what it is essentially they're forcing landlords that have a 3-family, like I have a 3-family. It's been in my family since 1956. And it's a 3-family, and 3-family and above, you have to hire every 4 years now a master plumber to inspect your gas pipes. Now I'm saying, when I first read it, I'm like, okay, oh, fine, send your inspectors, inspect my property. If there's something wrong, then we fix it. Fine, I have no problem with that. But no, I have to hunt for the master plumber and hire him and make sure he does the report. And if he doesn't do the report, I get a $10,000 fine on top of me after hiring him. So the lowest I found so far, I won't be able to do, I'm slated for 2 years from now, the way it's listed based on community boards. I have to spend $499. That's the cheapest, the guy told me. I have to still research, but he claims it goes up to $700. So that means I have to hire a master plumber, pay $500 to $700 every 4 years, on top of my property taxes that did increase, on top of my fuel costs that also went up. This is absolutely disgusting. We cannot survive in this city. You did mention about how you would keep the 65 and above with the property tax decrease, but also the working people also need a property tax decrease. Also, this is just totally disgusting. So my question to you is, how would you reform these agencies? I guess as mayor, you would have a large say in that, I would hope.
Absolutely. Well, let's take them issue by issue. Let's start about equity in the property tax. Let's go to Park Slope, where the dope from Park Slope has 2 buildings. But not just Park Slope, and it has nothing to do with the fact that he's mayor. This is what goes on for people in Park Slope who own property, or Carroll Gardens, or Prospect Heights, Brooklyn Heights. No, we'll call it Northern Brooklyn.
Right.
Now you start moving towards Central Brooklyn, Southern Brooklyn, and you look at properties in Bay Ridge or Dyker Heights or Gravesend, all over that area. And you say, why is it that a single family, 2-family, attached or unattached, why are they paying so much more property tax than these brownstones that are fetching millions in the northern part of Brooklyn? Well, they explain it by saying, well, they're much older, the buildings, which in many instances is true. So their assessments go back to when Peter Stuyvesant was ripping off the Indians. I might add the Canarsie Indians, they were for $24 in trinkets to buy Manhattan. But the point is, it was set in stone years ago. So now you got to level the playing field. So whether you're in Eltingville and Staten Island, whether you're in Middle Village, Mass Fifth and Queens, or you're in Morris Park in the Bronx, these people are paying way more property taxes than the buildings that are valued far more. And you say, no, let's level the property tax. Number 2, you talk about water and sewage. Sewage, Ed Norton. Remember, he was the sewer inspector.
Yes.
There's 2 stories. Remember how they Bill de Blasio is the tale of 2 cities.
Right.
Okay. There's the tale of 2 ways that people go about running buildings. A, they play by the rules, which is most of them. Or if they're out near Silver Lake in Staten Island, they tap into that reservoir that's there for an emergency and they suck all the water out without paying any water bills, or they clip the sewage bill.
Right.
There are a lot of tricks. So you need the inspectors to come in. The problem is you get a building inspector who comes in and he wants a scatol sandwich. You know what a scatol sandwich is. I don't know if that's what makes the building inspector and the health inspectors go away. If you're running a restaurant or a supermarket, you take a nice loaf of Italian bread, you put the scatol in their dead presidents, and they go off and they have their lunch and they forget any violations you have. So again, you got to level the playing field. Right, you got to level the playing field. What about the big issue that nobody wants to touch? Illegal subdivisions.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's
illegal stuff. And I'm not just talking about grandma living in the basement.
Right.
I'm talking, you go to a building like I have. I'll give you an example. Elmhurst, Corona, Jackson Heights. I said it's freaking 48 bags of garbage.
Yes, Kurt.
Outside on collection day for an apartment building that has maybe at best 8 apartments for families, normal sized apartments. And I've been in those apartments and you got to see, they turn it into a chop shop, what these people live in. They live in a closet.
Yes.
They live in a side with a lock on it and they got to pay weekly rent. And you say, that's got to stop. And then they're stealing electricity, they're stealing cable, they're stealing water, it's not paying the sewage bills. So that's what has to be eliminated. And that all has to be straightened out. The corruption is massive. Now, even mayors that I like Giuliani and Bloomberg, we had 20 great years of Republican mayors.
Right.
Very bad with Dinkins, the mentor for de Blasio, like teacher, like student. But no mayor has cracked down on that. It's like all mayors say, there's no such thing as a quota for parking tickets and moving violations. Phenomenal. You're all Pinocchios. We all know there is. $1 billion is built in the budget a year before.
Yes.
With me, no quotas. Absolutely. I'm going to admit, yes, there are quotas. We lied to you, but we're not imposing quotas because they call it performance evaluations. Why is it a cop will get an award for writing tickets, but not for making collars? You say to yourself, wait a second, that's not why they became police officers. Yeah, at times they got to write a summons. But that's not why a man or a woman decided to become a police officer. So that whole, what I call, again, technology is going to be dealt with. And I'm going to make a lot of people in the bureaucracy unhappy. But guess what? Tough noogies.
Absolutely.
We're there to serve the people,
absolutely,
not the bureaucrats.
Touch upon that thing with the illegal conversions. I have a house on my block, right? I'm in Kensington section of Brooklyn. There's a nice, the family moved. They were there since 1962. I'm the oldest family left on the block. And they moved. It was, I believe, a legal 2-family house. It had a double-deck wraparound porch, like an old Victorian look. And all of a sudden, they took the house over. They bought the house, whoever bought it. They gutted it out, made the attic, which I went in that attic. I remember what it looked like. It was not a livable attic. It was an old wooden attic. You store your boxes. So they made that into like an apartment area. So when you pass by the house with these old wooden porch with the wooden fence, and all of a sudden the fences are starting to fall off. The reason why they're falling off is because there's 5 billion bicycles, the electric bikes that are on this porch. And I'm not even exaggerating, at least 20 bikes that you see wrapped up against each other. That means there's at least 20-something people in there, like you said, dividing the rooms the size of a closet. And now this is now an apartment building, and it's quite disgusting. And now the house you can see deteriorating, even though they kind of try to update it. They took out the hedges. They made this stupid metal fence. They should have just left the hedges. It looked much beautiful. But besides that, they are destroying the look of that. And there's like 20-something people in there. It's quite disgusting. So I'm glad that you touched upon that, because that was one of my issues that were annoying me every time I passed by that house. And I'm glad you would.
Yeah, and you knew it based on common sense. I'll tell you another thing, because I live in a studio apartment that I share with my wife, Nancy, in the Upper West Side between Columbus and Central Park West on 87. That's right. If you want to whack me out there, you're exactly where I live. But We share the apartment with 15 rescue cats.
Right.
Now, you could imagine how much heavy lifting I do and have double hernias 3 times a day with the litter.
Yeah.
But one of my positions, first time ever, is that we will have no kill shelters.
Good.
Los Angeles has no kill shelters. Austin, other cities, they've given up the behavior that we pay millions of dollars for. A lot of people don't realize they see a stray or they see an injured animal or they can't take care of their friend, their family member. It's an animal. Because let's face it, let's be honest. How much better is it to be with your cat or dog than your wife, your husband, your kids, your nieces, your nephews, your aunts, your uncles, your neighbors, your coworkers? Sometimes you'd much rather be with your animal friends. But people don't realize. They'll see and they'll say, oh, call animal care and control. No, don't do that. Because if they're not claimed in 72 hours, they're euthanized. If the governor himself, Cuomo, was looking on the computer and said, I want that tuxedo cat 7242, you can't ask for a stay on the execution like in the old black and white movies when the guy's on death row, you know, Jimmy Cagney, Angels and Dirty Faces. Oh, I don't want to die. No. They euthanize them.
That's disgusting.
And so that's going to stop.
Good.
And the point being is I'm going to be a leader, do as I say and as I do.
I was going to actually save that question for last because a lot of people don't know about that you and your wife, Nancy, do go and rescue cats and help out animals. And that is a commendable thing you do. And I want to thank you as a person who loves animals myself, that you do that. And thank you for that. And,
well, just to give an example, a society that does not care for our friends, our family members, our dogs and cats and other animals is not going to care for the emotionally disturbed and the homeless. Look, see,
yes.
It's like if you're a caring society, you show care right across the line. Right. And with these progressives and these people who are so pretentious and omnipotent, they think they're so much better than us. Oh, no, we're progressives. We're liberals. How progressive and liberal are you if you allow people to live in subways, in parks, basically in their own urine and defecation, who have no control in their mental or physical faculties? You call yourself a liberal and progressive? No, I would say that you got window shades on and you're not using the one good force of government that is for the good, rescuing animals and human beings who are troubled. Correct. We have the capability of doing that. And when I'm mayor, we're going to do that right across the board.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. Under your mayorship, will the city still continue to be a sanctuary city when it comes to illegal aliens who are committing crimes?
Well, number one, let's just deal with sanctuary cities and sanctuary states to begin with, and we'll leave out MS 13, 18th Street, all the gangbangers I deal with. Right. Number one, even Rudy oversaw a sanctuary city. Bloomberg, sanctuary city. Across El Jefe, Chris Christie, sanctuary state, New Jersey. So, you know, they're all blustering. Meantime, they were in control of a sanctuary city, sanctuary state. It's existed that way since Ed Koch was mayor. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is this. ICE. Notice Eric Adams here. Mr. Now, all of a sudden, pro-law enforcement.
Oh, yes.
Had an epiphany.
Exactly.
All summer long, he's painting Black Lives Matter on the streets while there's rioting, shooting, and looting. And he was calling, remember, like Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo, ICE agents thugs.
Yes.
Worse than the criminals themselves that they were taking into custody. We have a position here where ICE is denied being able to serve a warrant for the arrest of people who committed serious crimes as illegals. Now, how crazy is that? I'm dealing with gangbangers like 18th Street, MS 13, thugs of the worst type. Right. And yet, the AOC all-out crazies of the world do not want them remanded to jail and deported. That's nuts. If they've committed a crime here, the law says that they have to do their time here and then they get deported. No. Well, our city, our state, New Jersey, Connecticut, all of them say no. They basically spit in the face of the ICE agents. Now, I will sit down with ICE and I will say, hey, look, Miguel, who's been in the country for 30 years, and now you clip him because he made an illegal turn or didn't have the right registration on his livery cab. You really think that you needed that retainer? I can show you the drug dealers and gangbangers who need not only to be incarcerated for the crimes committed here, but deported. That's the one area that I would sit down with ICE and say, look, you're talking to Curtis Sliwa. I'm street smart.
Right.
Miguel stays because they're not going back.
Right.
Anybody who thinks you're going to deport in the United States 12 million or more people to Mexico, Central America, or wherever they come, that ain't ever happening. They're going to need a pathway to citizenship that has to be figured out. But in the meantime, if they commit crime, they got to do the time and then bye-bye,
Right.
back to where you were birthed.
Absolutely. Speaking of law and order issues, the qualified immunity was taken away from the NYPD, and
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
the city council that did it. It was out of the 51 members of the city council. We only have 3 Republicans.
This must be what you
So how could we
Oh.
overturn something like that? With the 3 Republicans only, how do we overturn getting qualified immunity, give that back to the NYPD? Because right now what it is, they're going to wind up needing an insurance policy. You really think, these moronic Democrats really think that police are now going to rush to domestic violence calls? You really think they're going to run to any type of calls now so they could be sued and lose their job and lose their house? They just, it galls me to no end to see the stupidity that is running our city currently. And what's your thoughts on that particular issue?
Well, they're all sanctimonious hypocrites. I will give credit to about 5 or 6 of the Democrats in city council, including Robert Holden, some of the others who have joined with the 3 Republicans who said, do not take qualified immunity away from the NYPD because it's a slippery slope.
Sure.
Whoever puts hands on, so next it'll be correctional officers, guaranteed, court officers, security officers under NYPD supervision in the schools, Department of Homeless Services, police who are in the shelters. At times they have to put hands on.
Right.
Those attendants in psychiatric facilities, right? They have to put hands on at times when their patients become irascible and they physically threaten other patients and the attendants themselves.
Right.
So what are you going to do? Strip qualified immunity from all of them? And by the way, when I'm mayor, since that will still exist, I'm going to announce I will not have qualified immunity. It'd be like, remember Spartacus? Who's Spartacus, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's set the example. If we're going to force the cops not to have qualified immunity, let's start at the top and drip down. Hey, Jumani Williams, public advocate that does nothing. By the way, you need to know something about Jumani.
I was in student government with him. Go ahead.
He not only wants to defund the police, defund prisons, he hates them.
Yes.
Yet every day he's driven around in an SUV that we pay for a job that you do nothing, public advocate, but run for office on our tax dollar. Right. He has the security of NYPD, armed security, 24/7, 365. Although he wants to defund the police, why not set an example? And do you know where he lives? You know where his
Fort Hamilton Army Base.
That's right. The active garrison, the safest place in the city. And every night when he returns, even though they know who he is by now, he must show ID to the military police. Yet everywhere else in the city, if you say, well, you need to show ID, Jumani says, oh, that's a violation of people's rights. You shouldn't have to show ID to vote or do anything else. Yeah. Again, they're all sanctimonious hypocrites. Oh, yeah. So if there's not going to be qualified immunity for cops, there won't be qualified immunity for judges, district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, prosecutors, elected officials, their staff, civil servants, the mayor, the public advocate, the controller, from top to bottom. And I will say on day number 1, hey, I don't want qualified immunity. I want to stand with my brothers and sisters in solidarity that we strip qualified immunity from the NYPD.
Absolutely. Would you have former Mayor Giuliani part of your advisory board, or would you keep him like? How would you include former mayor in some sort of capacity?
I've talked with Rudy. He's been my kumbarichich over the years, but I think he's at a different level now.
Mhm.
You know, his involvement in the aftermath of the elections with Dominion and Smartmatic and the continued cases and his battles with the federal government now because they came in and seized his property as part of a subpoena. I can always take advice from Rudy. There's no doubt about it. But I think in many instances, it's not about going back to the Brattons or the Kellys or the other previous elected officials. I believe we don't need to go on any nationwide talent hunts. Look what that did. It brought us Carranza. God, the worst. Carajo Carranza. What we got to do is look within the ranks. There are so many experienced men and women that we need to elevate. A new generation. Mine is not a new generation. I'm a baby boomer. I'm 67. But the hipsters and millennials out there, that age group, who have a lot to offer, a lot to say, it's their time.
Right.
They are the majority. They have the experience. We need to elevate them into positions where they are shot callers and they can bring us into a new age because there are a lot of things that I'm oblivious to because of who I am, a baby boomer. There are a lot of things that Rudy or Kelly or Bratton or others with great experience are oblivious to because of all the modern technology that exists and the way people interact with one another. So I will always take advice from these men of honor who have done extraordinary things to rescue our city. But I'd like to start looking in a direction to developing people that I've seen within the ranks who really made their bones, but they go unrecognized. They're never given an opportunity to speak because we keep going back. Let's go to this, but hey, there are plenty of really solid people in this new generation of hipsters and millennials, and they're going to have to be the leaders now and in the future.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of, we were mentioning Giuliani a second ago. What would you do to fix the quality of life issues like graffiti and the dirty streets? What would you do to achieve this, to bring our city back from looking like Detroit right now, where it's filthy, it's grimy, it's crimey, it's totally disgusting. I like, for example, I had my cars parked the other day, and I'm watching from my home cameras. I'm seeing the garbage man throwing garbage over my car, and the bag hit the window of the car. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? It's just that no one cares, it seems like, anymore. The graffiti is on an uprise. You see the dirty streets. It's just a breakdown. Obviously, it stems from the leadership on top. And I believe, especially with a strong leader, that would hopefully fix itself. What would you do to make sure that, like what Giuliani did with the squeegee cleaners, he got rid of the squeegee cleaners, and then winds up being people jumping the turnstiles. You wind up finding out that they also have a warrant out for their arrest. And so those were quality of life issues also that he addressed, and also helped stem crime, started getting those numbers down. What would you do to...
Well, now you're talking about my sweet spot. These are things that I've been dealing with for years. Just recently, it was sort of ironic you mentioned the squeegee posses. I confronted a squeegee guy near the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel between 8th and 9th Avenues near the Port Authority.
Right.
And I remember saying to him, hey, without mayor, you're going to have to get a job. And he said, when you're mayor, you're going to have to refund the police first to put me out of business. That's a crackhead squeegee guy in the streets. Who understands that?
Right. He has more common sense.
Right. Obviously, that's not going to be tolerated. Again, an example, on Saturday, I was in McCarran Park.
Mm-hmm.
It was a statue to a Polish priest who had been executed in communist Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of Poles attended a ceremony in his honor because that statue had been desecrated and vandalized. As soon as that happened, I assigned guardian angels to that area to make sure it didn't happen again because there are no cameras.
Right.
And even though most people, they think I'm Hispanic because of my last name, Silva, I'm not Hispanic. Obviously, you've heard I'm part Italian, but my last name, Sliwa, is Polish.
Polish, right?
So I'm saying to everybody there, hipsters, millennials, and a lot of the Polish Americans who now live in that area, I'd say, I'll tell you why this happened. They said, why, Curtis? I said, around the corner on Greenpoint Avenue is the landmarked old catering hall called the Polonaise.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Totally graffitied up.
Yep.
It's been closed for about 5 years. Totally graffitied up. This is a landmark building. This is where I was sashed as the Grand Marshal of the Pulaski Day Parade way back in 2012.
Mhm.
And I'm saying this is a historic building for Polish Americans. Weddings have happened there, confirmations, communion parties, civic events. It was the place that you came when you were politicking and trying to get the Polish American vote, when it was a very sizable community there.
Right.
It's desecrated. I said, look, if I were walking by the Polonaise and I was a vandal or I had a few screws loose, and I saw that this was all vandalized with nothing done to cover it up or clean it or get it back to its natural state, I would just think you people don't mind.
Yep.
And you see, nobody wanted to hear that, but that's broken windows theory.
Yep.
That always works. If you allow it to exist in one spot, then people walking through who have ill thoughts about what they want to do to property will begin to vandalize because they'll think you don't care. So the Polish people said, well, you know, Sliwa, you're being hard on us. I said, no, you don't wait for government. Government doesn't take care of us from the cradle to the grave. You escaped socialism and communism in Poland because they promised you that because you wanted freedom. You wanted the ability to make your own decision. What prevents all of you from gathering up supplies, cleaning up the Polonaise, so that it again becomes a symbol of respect for the Polish American community? Because what do the hipsters and millennials who've gone into that area think now about Polish Americans when they see this shrine to Polish American tradition vandalized, graffiti? So I'm not going to be dependent on government. I'm going to say, very much out of the words of JFK, what have you done for your city? Because forget about always coming to City Hall and expecting a handout or City Hall to help, because politicians, you know what they are. It's like Yang here. Hey, free money, free money. Where are you going to get the money, Yang? Free money, free. Don't worry about it. Sounds good. Everybody's going to be online. But we know there's a $3 billion looming debt that could cause us to go into the drink fiscally. And yet you have people promising everything under the sun. I'm going to turn around and say, are you kidding? You're going to have to do this for yourself.
Right.
The government is not here to give you a pacifier. You want a pacifier? Go take some ecstasy, dance to EDM to the wee hours of the morning, and then you could stick a pacifier in your mouth because all of a sudden you're salivating.
Well, now they could do it if they now they could do it if they clean up the Polonaise, and they could go do it in there.
But the point being is, everyone wants government to do. As I said to them, look, I sent guardian angels to protect the statue.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your priests? There was only one priest who showed up. I said, I could go to any church here in Greenpoint on any Sunday, Roman Catholic church, and it's like filled with priests from Poland.
Right.
You know, try to find an American priest any longer. You know, they're either from Colombia, Nigeria, Poland, wherever they're from. I said, where are all the priests? This is one of their own. It was executed because he stood up to communism. I said, that shows it. When people see that and they say, oh, we hadn't even thought of that. Well, I did. I said, where the hell are all the priests? Responsibility. The priests should have been out there protecting that statue. Citizens should have been taking turns volunteering to protect that statue. That would have shamed government into taking more proactive positions of installing cameras, so that if it ever happened again, at least we know who was responsible.
Absolutely. Curtis, what do you say to the Republican primary voters that were supporters of Donald Trump? Tonight, you sounded like Donald Trump on a lot of issues, and I do love exactly the way you presented things. I really, that's what, I was a Donald Trump alternate delegate from New York State. And I love that he did something different in the sense of breaking away from the normal politician crap where they feed you the line and all that. He spoke straight to the people. And I just wanted to know, what was your reasonings why you didn't connect with the president on a lot of things? Because, I listened to your show, the radio show in the past, and, you always, What was your reasonings on that?
Oh yeah, no, look, like so many New Yorkers, I had a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump that goes way back.
Right.
I'll never forget. We were in the 69th Street Armory, schwitzing because they had no air conditioning in the middle of July. We were both honorees of the New York State Conservative Party. This is before Michael Long was in charge.
Right.
And I looked to, Donald. He was in his tux. He's getting a Conservative Party award. I'm getting a Conservative Party award. I said, Donald, you're not a conservative. I'm not a conservative. How the hell did we end up with the Conservative Party awards? He said, because they wanted attention. And remember, Donald Trump was not a conservative then. He was liberal and progressive.
Yes.
I was much more moderate than he was on issues, but we had a good relationship then. We had a great relationship when he supported the annual parade, Veterans Day parade, when it was going insolvent. He basically rescued that, and I praised him. What drove me nuts about Donald Trump when he was president was the tweeting.
Okay.
I would have gotten the Chinese finger cuffs and just put it on him, because there's so much to talk about in trying to run government and deal with all the geopolitical issues, which I felt he did a great job. Middle East, dealing with the menace of Red China, allowing for drugs to be used, experimental drugs, which have saved my life because I've been shot 5 times. I had prostate cancer, stage 4, ileitis, colitis, chronic Crohn's disease. Thank God I was able to use some drugs that hadn't yet been approved by the FDA, or I'd be room temperature at this point. But at other times, it was maddening. So I never voted for Hillary. Oh, my God, I would have impaled myself with a microphone or Joe Biden. But I went independent.
Okay.
Now, I can assure you, my votes in the blue state of New York
I know.
in no way, shape, or form helped unelect Donald Trump. And Donald now is Citizen Trump down in Mar-a-Lago. He's obviously planning an attempt possibly to run again. Mm-hmm. And I'm open-minded to everything that Donald Trump is saying. I haven't closed my mind to it.
Right.
But I know some people, they have, a litmus test. Donald on everything. And I think you've heard me already say some things about people that, like Rudy Giuliani and others, say at times, I disagree.
Yeah, that's the thing. At the end of the day, I was mentioning before you came on, this is New York City. We're not going to agree with everyone on 100%. Like I think Ed Koch said it in the past. If you agree with me on 100%, you need like a psychiatrist or something like that. He said in so many words. So at the end of the day, like you said, with a litmus test, now look, we're not going to agree on 100% on everything. And I just wanted to let people know that don't just base things on one thing or two things. You got to look at the overall assessment of a particular candidate, you or Fernando Mateo or whoever that might be, for whatever race, and say, on the law and order issues, who's the best for this? On the quality of life issues, who's the best for this? On the taxes issues, who's the best for this? This is a city we're talking about. You're not running for president of the United States. You're not running for Senate to represent us in Washington. You're running as our leader to represent us on the city level. And these are the issues that we were asking you, like we asked our former guest.
I'll give you an example. We have to stay united as much as at times there's vitriol between me and Fernando Mateo. We go way back, way back in time. And I'm sure there are things he dislikes about me. There are things I dislike about him. The one thing is a de Blasio Republican. He raised money for de Blasio. It's unforgivable to me. But if he happened to beat me in the Republican primary on June 22nd, I will support Fernando Mateo. I'm not going to support any of the Democrats who at one point were all in favor of defunding the police.
Yes, they were.
So I believe, look, there's so few Republicans to begin with. It's an 8-to-1 ratio. That whatever happens in the primaries, both at the city councilmanic level, or president level, controller level, unfortunately, we don't even have a candidate for public advocate, or at the mayoral level, I will support the Republican ticket because I've looked at the alternatives. And like I said, there are some good Democrats out there. Robert Holden is a perfect example of that. But, that's my position. I believe in unity afterwards. You go in there, you have a good debate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's feisty, it gets hot, but when all is said and done, you look at who your adversaries are, and they're all mashuga. They're ubats, they're titched. They want to give the city away to the Democrat Socialists of America, to Antifa. And no, absolutely not.
Now, speaking of Antifa, as you see during our Summer of Love that we had in the city, as you mentioned before, that you had things thrown at you when you were protecting that. What was which you were protecting a store, I think, in front with the Guardian Angels. They threw things at you, and you had your jaw broken. What would you do if you were? What would you do different if you were mayor of New York at that same time? With people just look, people have the right to protest, whatever that is. As long as you do it legally, you're not blocking traffic. Because God forbid if I had a heart attack, right? Or anyone for that matter had a heart attack, and you're in an ambulance. For example, recently there was a protest in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, due to the Palestinian-Israeli issues. But that's fine. Everyone has a right to protest. I have no problem with that. I protest too. That's fine. But you don't block traffic. You don't. If you're going to block traffic, you're going to have where the police know and they know how to cordon off traffic when an ambulance comes through. So that way people don't die because of your actions as a group of people. What would you do different if you were mayor, making sure that people still have the right to protest and speak their mind, but do it in a lawful manner and make sure that no property was destroyed and, or best protected as best as possible? What would you do as mayor?
Well, number one, you're going to have a permit.
Right.
You don't have a permit, you get locked up.
Right.
This nonsense of being able to be footloose and fancy free and at a moment's notice go running out into the streets and vandalize and desecrate and scream F you and all that. You're going to do that? Some of that is illegal. The stuff that is legal, it's going to be in a controlled, permittable way in which you better have your own marshals. I was part of many acts of civil disobedience and many protests in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
Back then, the anti-war movement and other movements, you had to have your own marshals. That means your own volunteers who were trained. They would be on the outside of the march. So if there were problems inside, and there always are,
sure,
the marshals go in and try to deal with it. If it becomes overwhelming for them, then the cops who are flanking them at a distance will then come in. That's a much better. And if you don't do that, you don't get a permit because it's just too easy to decide, hey, I got nothing to do. Let's have demonstration de jour. 100 people, we block traffic, we scream, we hoot, we holler, we vandalize, we graffiti. No. That all comes to an end. And when it comes to the life of Antifa, let me tell you, first off, where was the police intel infiltrating Antifa? You don't think they have enough white guys graduating the academy who would blend right in with Antifa? Come on.
Yeah.
It's like 21 Jump Street,
Yeah, 21.
Hey, should have been right in there. But de Blasio wouldn't let them do that. De Blasio won't allow them to use the technology of the moment that is used by Interpol and other police agencies all over the world, facial recognition technology. Police are not permitted to use that. You may not be aware there are drones, small drones that you see many people will play with. They go to Floyd Bennett Field, they're flying drones. We've got close to 28 drones in Floyd Bennett Field in the same hangars that the police planes and the police helicopters are. Yet de Blasio won't allow those small drones to be used. They could have been following the looters and the shooters and photographing them and videoing them right in the side streets. Wouldn't permit it. And the mounted unit, 80 police officers, men and women, trained to be on those horses where they can see everything. Right. And let me tell you, when those horses charge you, nobody stands in the way of the horses. People are afraid of those horses. And then when the horse gets up, whoa, everybody does the bird.
Yeah.
He will not allow those police officers to use the horse unit. And that's all going to come into play. First of all, we paid for that with tax dollars.
Right.
Why would you not use all of the sophisticated technology? Because remember, somewhere in the bowels of South Yemen in some cave where some guy is eating hummus and watching all of this on CNN, right? He's saying, 3 times could be the charm.
Yeah.
Look at how weak they are. They can't even control their own.
Yep.
Hey, Akbar, it's time. It's time to go through the border there in Mexico and find our calling and hit New York a third time. And trust me, ISIS, Al Qaeda, or any of the
They have not forgotten.
new groups would love to be able to get at us again. And I want to know, with the budget cuts of $1 billion, there used to be 1,000 men and women highly trained on the anti-terrorism task force, many of them who could speak Arabic and translate and were Arabic themselves.
Right.
Many of them who grew up in Bay Ridge, which has had one of the longest lasting Arabic populations anywhere in America, especially along Atlantic Avenue. You go down Fifth Avenue there. And so those young men and women join the police department and they have certain skills. How many have been eliminated because of the $1 billion cut? Every time I ask, I feel like I got to get a FOIL demand to try to find out. And all of a sudden, you don't get any answers from DCPI, the department's information bureau. I have a feeling there have been some major cuts in the anti-terrorism task force, which means we're vulnerable.
Yeah,
More vulnerable than ever, because if you're in that cave in Yemen, you're realizing how weak we've become, how we don't even let cops be cops. Can you imagine? You could say, hey, we could set off a bombing in that city now that would rock their world.
absolutely. And we'll be all victims at the altar of politically correctness.
Of course.
And it's absolutely. I want to turn it over to our board of directors for any questions you guys might have. Larry, you have anything? Alan, Lawrence, just
I got it. Hey, hi, Curtis. I got a few questions.
Larry Schneider, our secretary.
Hi, Curtis. And we met a few times, and I think you're great. So, a few questions. How would you approach the homeless situation in the city in practical terms?
Well, if you're homeless and you're living in the streets, subways, or parks, you're going to be physically removed and taken to a shelter. We got to make sure you're cleaned up, you get clean clothes. We got to check to see if you're in complete control of your mental or physical faculties. And a lot of homeless people are. They're not emotionally disturbed. They're homeless for a number of reasons, but a lot of them have serious drug and alcohol addictions. And so in whatever shelter that they get sent to, there's got to be programs in the shelter. And one of the things that Bloomberg did that is such a disgrace, because he was always basing things on the numbers, always analytics. You know, he had no touch for the common man. It was always based on analytics, like Wall Street. That's how he made his fortune.
Right.
We had Camp LaGuardia upstate in Orange County, which was set up by Fiorello LaGuardia, the mayor then during the Depression. Single able-bodied men were homeless, destitute. They would get shipped up to Camp LaGuardia, where they had their own farm. They had to grow their own food. They had to process their own food. They had to self-sustain themselves. And it became sort of like Job Corps, where they would learn a skill. And if they had problems, not too many had drug problems back then, but a lot of were alkies. And they'd have to dry out. And then they could be brought back into the city with some negotiable skills. So Bloomberg said, it costs too much money. Let's close Camp LaGuardia. Well, guess what? We could use 10 Camp LaGuardias upstate. You go through central and western New York, it's like a wasteland. There's nothing. So just like we have reservoirs up in Westchester and Dutchess County that obviously provides us with our water. We pay a fee for that, and rightfully so, because we got great tap water. We should have camps up there, not prisons, camps. Because we used to fill the prisons upstate, which subsidizes their communities. But now that they've closed a lot of the prisons, you have camps for the men and women who need to be reconstructed, rehabilitated. They won't be there. There'll be no temptations around them. You know, some of those towns up there, it's a one traffic light town, and ain't nobody selling meth or crack on the corner, the one corner in the town. So they'll be able to straighten up. And then if they decide to return to the city, so be it. At least they'll have been insulated against some of those problems. But a lot of those folks will probably want never to come back to New York, because now they have skills. They're dried out. They can go anywhere they want to go because they'll be able to get a job.
Okay.
Thank you, Curtis, on that. Larry, you have another question? Or Alan, do you have any questions?
Yeah, another question.
Go ahead.
What would you do about people claiming a hardship declaration and they haven't paid rents for months and they don't need to send any proof about that, and it turns out that this is it's a scam, a renter is scamming people with a hardship declaration? How would you address that?
Well, you got to show proof. Like everything in life nowadays, they don't want you to show no stinking papers, no papers. Well, if you're able to live without having to pay rent, and some people are in that position, that's fine. Then you got to figure out, how do we make the landlord whole so that he or she doesn't have to bite off more than they can chew, because they still have to remember that, as some of you know, being landlords, you still got to provide the water, the electricity, the gas, the whole 9 yards. You still have to provide a place for them to live. And even in normal times, pre-pandemic times, tenant landlord court. What landlord? Hey, landlords, forget it. It's like they're people of no consequence. You can go in there, you can vandalize the apartment, turn all the water on, break holes in the right in the walls, and the judge goes, well, you know, maybe they had some emotional issues. Maybe in a year you'll be able to evict them. So I got to deal with that, because there it's not a fair, square situation. The landlord has absolutely no choice. You look in some other places, 3 days, and all of a sudden the sheriff is tacking on a notice on your door.
Right.
Now, you're still able to get relief by going to the local courts, but it's a much quicker rate and much fairer to landlords. In New York City, forget about it. It'll take you a month of Sundays to evict somebody who clearly is scamming the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Larry, any more, or
No.
pass on to Alan? Do you have anything for Alan, our chairman, Alan Benben? Alan?
Yeah. Hi, Curtis. All right, let's go with the theme of the homeless. Bill de Blasio, the city council, they have just recently stated that they are going to create neighborhoods homeless shelters. Where I work over by Sheepshead Bay, we have a homeless shelter that's opening up, or they plan on, at a former furniture site, Neptune Avenue, where it meets Emmons Avenue by the train. Underneath Bloomberg, he did open a lot of homeless shelters. He did open them in areas that were generally poor because the property was cheaper. So two-part question. One, de Blasio's plan, it's opening up in this particular case, and I've seen a few others, homeless shelters in primarily middle-class neighborhoods, near schools, near parks, near places of worship, near private houses. Obviously, that affects people and their property rates. Who wants to buy a condo, co-op, a house next to a homeless shelter? Two, you're paying premium prices for land to be converted to homeless shelters. How many fewer homeless shelters could we have versus putting it over in, say, the former Piano District in the Bronx? What would you do in regards to the homeless shelters? I understand we need a way to help house people, but it needs to be done economically and fair to the city's residents who are paying the taxes.
Sure. Department of Homeless Services has been a complete disaster. So the plan was to build 80 shelters, or repurpose buildings into shelters in 80 locations throughout the city. As de Blasio claimed, sharing the responsibility everywhere. That turned out not to be true because there was no transparency. Overnight, these shelters have been created, no discussion. Community board doesn't know anything about its citizens, and in many instances, elected officials. So it's just jammed down people's throats. They're basically tough noogies. I'll give you a perfect location. North shore of Staten Island, Bay Street, Victory Boulevard. They're building this mega shelter, supposedly for women, 500. 500. That's you can't manage a shelter of 500 people. Plus, they got 3 other shelters in the area. And you look at a lot of the neighborhoods, in the poor, impoverished areas, they're loaded up with shelters. And now sort of they're forcing it in the middle class and the upper middle class area. Notice they wanted to put a shelter on Central Park South. What happened to that shelter? Randy Mastro was representing the well-heeled and the very fortunate in society, and they got a court order against the conversion of one of the hotels there right near Fifth Avenue. Let's look at the Upper West Side, which had a heart attack. The very people who elected Bill de Blasio, not once, but the schmucks and putzes elected him twice. And then overnight, they saw homeless men being shoved into the Lucerne Hotel, the Ballot Court, and two other hotels in the area from 59th Street right on up to 96th Street. And they had collective heart attacks. And so then Randy Mastro was called upon again, the former deputy mayor of the Giuliani administration. He filed suit on behalf of residents. And so the judge had come up with a compromise. The judge said, look, for men in the Lucerne, 2 to a room now. And the Lucerne, it's not a flop house, but it's not 5-star top shelf hotel. Tell you what, we're going to shift the single able-bodied men down to the Marriott Hotel on Wall Street, right? New hotel, top shelf, 5-star, and each man is going to have his own room. Now, when I talk to the men, they say, oh, great. You know, the guy, my roommate snores. The other one, he's mainlining. The other guy, he's drinking and belligerent. I have my own room. Legal Aid came in there and found 3 of the occupants, homeless men who claimed that they would be emotionally traumatized, they would be incontinent, they would be impotent as a result of being forcibly moved from their new home, the Lucerne, to the Marriott. What chutzpah! You don't belong in hotels at $175 a night at taxpayers' expense. You're going to be in a shelter. Now that obviously COVID-19 is like going, almost gone, it's back to the shelters and out of the hotels. This is maddening. And quite frankly, I'm going to go into federal court and challenge that edict that I told you that exists in New York City and New York City alone because of the federal jurisdiction, where you can show up anywhere in New York City, declare yourself to be indigent without means of support, without shelter, without medical plans. And we have to give you 3 hots in a cot, free medical, and provide you transportation and the whole 9 yards. That's got to stop. Because if I were homeless in, let's say, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, can you imagine what the shelter system must be like in Wilkes-Barre? I'm coming to New York City. I could get to stay in a Midtown hotel. There are 18 hotels in Midtown near Times Square that have been converted to COVID-19 hotels. And you think you're going to get those men and women out of there? Legal Aid is going to go into court and claim that they now have tenants' rights. They've been there more than a year. And just like landlords know what it's like to get rid of a
How far away
tenant,
is Long Beach?
it's going to take a month of Sundays. It's going to take forever. And that's why the city will never have a quick recovery. Where are tourists going to stay? All these hotel rooms are occupied by homeless men and homeless women, many of them with severe issues and severe problems of drug addiction and alcohol abuse.
Absolutely. Alan, do you have any more questions? Or Lawrence, are you on the line right now?
Well, I have one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So Curtis, thank you very much, by the way, for coming on to the Brooklyn Tea Party to speak to us. Definitely informative, definitely entertaining. My final question for you is going to be this. With a lot of the states currently expanding legalized recreational marijuana, I happen to work over in the facility. I happen to see the results of early marijuana use. University of Tel Aviv, they did a report, a paper, higher rates of Alzheimer's, dementia for people who started younger, baby boomers, who are heavy marijuana smokers, younger people, higher rates of schizophrenia, mental illness, etc. We now have the city like any other drug addict, and that's the only way to call cities when it sees money. They are desperate to get that marijuana money. What is your stance on legalized marijuana, yay or nay? Please.
Well, number one, the first step was medical marijuana. of which I've taken full use of from time to time because of the injuries that I incurred, the 5 gunshot wounds, the stage 4 prostate cancer, colitis, ileitis, and then chronic Crohn's disease, which I still have. I got to tell you, I was on morphine, fentanyl, and oxys. I went from 220 pounds down to 140 pounds. And some people had the gall to say, oh, Curtis, you've lost so much weight. You're looking so good. Looking so good. I'm going to be a cadaver in formaldehyde. Are you crazy? Throwing the bull feathers at me. And I had to have a series of operations that put all my plumbing back together. But I remember after one 8.5-hour operation at Columbia Presbyterian, they gave me a combination of Tylenol and Prozac. And I lost it. And I remember my wife, Nancy, said, Doc, why don't you just try medical marijuana? Because, oh, we're not permitted to house medical marijuana because it's a federal offense. When you look at it, it's listed at the same level as fentanyl and heroin by the DEA. There's no way that marijuana is like heroin or fentanyl. And now that they have the dispensaries in some of the states that through initiative and referendum voted it in, which I'm for initiative and referendum. If you notice, you can't even go to a bank and put the money in a bank because the federal government won't allow it. So what do? Stick the money in a mattress and then some guy comes with a toolie and robs you at home when you bring in the moolah shmoolah from the medical marijuana clinic. Now we're talking about recreational use of marijuana. Look, nobody was harder on the streets against people smoking herb or blunts. We used to take it out of people's mouths. We used to destroy it in addition to crack and meth and heroin. We used to take needles out of their arms. But there's no way you're going to stop marijuana. And the underground economy that has resulted from that is enormous, not just organized crime, but it has led to the spread of a lot of these street gangs. And because they're battling over turf. The problem is, and I understand the medicinal problems, impaired driving is a problem. There's no doubt about it. We haven't yet figured that out. But if you tax it too much, the underground economy will emerge again to compete because there are no taxes. And all the states get greedy. It should be taxed at the same rate as the sales tax, period. What, 8.5%, period, instead of what they talk about, 17%, 23%. That just drives the underground economy. Look, I wish that there were measures that could prevent it from being used by certain people, adults, but it ain't going to happen. I mean, you just walk down the block. I mean, like people are vaping all over the place. You get a contact high, it's like somebody just shotgunned you. Right. We just got to make sure, like with alcohol, we try to prevent those underage from getting it. We know they do. You had mentioned some of the medical problems as a result of people using marijuana. Well, there's fetal alcohol syndrome. Far more people using alcohol. I got to tell you, in breaking up fights and disputes in the streets and bars and gin mills and restaurants everywhere in America and throughout the world where we have guardian angels in 13 countries, 130 cities, and I've been to most of them. Most of the times that there are fights or disputes or there's violence, it's mostly because of alcohol abuse. Sometimes marijuana, yeah, but mostly alcohol abuse. So I think we're at a point of no return here. Better to regulate it, make sure it's good product as opposed to tainted product, which some of it has been in the underground economy, and get it out of the hands of gangs and organized crime, which just prosper and grow as a result of it.
Thank you, Curtis. Alan, any other questions or?
No, I think it's what, 2 for each board member. Let's let Lawrence have his shot.
All right, Lawrence, are you here with us? Or did he?
I don't think he's on.
Okay, I think that's anyone else from our board of directors that have a question for Curtis.
Yes, I do.
Yes, Bill Lloyd, our vice president. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, hi. First of all, Curtis, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It means a lot to us that you were able to be part of this tonight. There's a lot of support for you out there, believe me. Okay, this is my question. If you're elected mayor of New York City, would you be willing to democratize and make more egalitarian the pistol permit application rules that Police Plaza has, regarding the acquiring of a pistol for either full carry or target and home protection. It's not right that we should have less rights than people who live in Nassau and Suffolk counties. Thank you.
Oh, there's no doubt. And first off, the reason that I'm enamored with the Tea Party isn't because I knew that much about it when it first came about. But remember, I was at the same station, WABC. The acronym at times stood for Always Broadcasting Curtis, as Mark Levin, who was in the forefront of the movement and would explain, the Tea Party movement, the philosophy, all that. Tea Party, I figured, what? Lipton or Tetley? Gentiles drink Lipton. Jewish people drink Tetley. They don't even know why they drink Tetley, because years ago, Arthur Godfrey, who was an anti-Semite, the advertiser was Lipton. He would say anti-Jewish things, and Jewish grandmothers, boobies and zetas would say, "You never drink Lipton in this household. That's why you drink Tetley." That's what I thought the Tea Party was. Little did I realize.
Pinky's up. Remember, pinky's up.
That's right. But Mark Levin was great. He would give the breakdown of what the Tea Party stood for. So I was very active in listening. Now, when it comes to having a gun legally registered, remember when I was shot 5 times on the orders of John Gotti Sr. to John Gotti Jr. on June 19th of 1992 by the Jadruls of the Gambino crime family, the NYPD, they could not protect me. Remember, this is not Giuliani time. It was Dinkins time. They said to me, "Hey, pal, you ought to get a permit to carry. You qualify here. You're a talk radio host." They almost whacked you twice. You could. I said, "No, I can't carry because I'm the leader of the Guardian Angels, and the Guardian Angels don't carry weapons. But I appreciate you offering me that opportunity." Now, I was one of the few to be offered that opportunity. Now, others have paid a lot of scat.
Okay, no offense, but I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the citizens of the 5 boroughs.
Yeah.
Why should they have any less rights than the citizens of Nassau and Suffolk?
No, and let me explain that momentarily here. Hey, Eric Adams, he carries a gun, right?
Right.
And he says, "I go to church with a gun. And when I'm mayor, I'm going to have a gun." So if he could be mayor and go to church with a gun, even having been a former captain in the NYPD, yes, if you qualify, particularly if you've been a victim of crime already, yes, I believe that you should have the ability to carry, should have the ability to have a weapon at your home, your place of business. No, I'm not opposed to that at all. I was just explaining that for me, I chose not to.
Right.
And that's an option. People can choose to have or not to have, but definitely if they've been victims of crime.
You would want the Police Plaza pistol permit section guidelines revised, because they changed radically after 9/11, most unfairly.
Well, they're also very corrupt. I don't have to tell you, there's been trial after trial that people can show up with a boatload of money and get a permit when it shouldn't be based on the amount of money that you're bribing them with, but need and your ability to carry a weapon and use it properly. The one caveat I would have is that you got to prove that you can use the weapon, because like any kind of weapon, it could be pepper spray, it could be anything.
That's why the NRA gives classes.
Yeah, no, I think you got to prove that you can use the weapon. You got to go through a training course and prove that you can use the weapon, because I've seen too many instances where people have a weapon and because they never used it before, now it's the first time the weapon gets used on them. That's all I would say.
I think that's already written into the guidelines, and the NRA provides those courses.
Yeah, but we remember, New York City and New York State don't deal with the NRA. They're suing the NRA. That's why the NRA went to Texas. So they treat the NRA as if they are the Antichrist. I would not.
No, what I'm saying is firearms safety courses are written into the guidelines already.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people who've gotten them because they bribed their way into getting them, and you know that.
Well, nothing that we can say here tonight can justify the actions of criminals.
No, and I'm saying, yeah, if you're legally able to carry a weapon, whether it's a carry permit or to have it on your place of business or your home, you should be able to do that.
So
Absolutely.
you would be in favor of having the guidelines rewritten, because right now the guidelines are very draconian.
I would have to be honest, you're more skilled and knowledgeable about the guidelines than I am, because I never got to that point of reading them. So I apologize for not knowing them, but I certainly will make it a point to now start studying them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your sincere answer. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Curtis. I appreciate that. Curtis, before I continue on, I just wanted to throw one more question in before we go, just briefly, if any audience members have a question before you get to go. When do you start the train ride? When does that start? Tonight?
That starts tomorrow, 10:30.
Okay.
It's at Union Square. I've invited all the Democratic mayoral candidates to show up. I brought 2 hockey masks because we're going to be riding the Slashers Express, the number 4.
Oh,
It
God.
had all those slashings within an hour, the number 4 train there.
Yeah.
And ironically, that's the train that I started patrolling as the Guardian Angels back in 1979 when it was called the Muggers Express.
Express. Yep. Well, the quick question I have is about all these bicyclists. Everywhere you go, there's a bike lane, and also these camera lights. Everywhere you go, there's a camera light to get the driver, the evil driver. How dare you own a car in this city? Let's put a pedestrian mall in the middle of Times Square or whatever. Let's just make where we can't drive. Let's put a bike lane on the Brooklyn Bridge. Let's just be making sure no one could drive in this city. What would you do with the bicyclists and also the camera light thing? But with the bicyclists that seem like, if I'm on a light, I'm sitting there at a light with my car, all of a sudden I see from many different directions bicyclists, from delivery guys, just the regular people driving their bikes, going up the street the wrong way, going across the street, going through lights. And especially that some of these bikes go faster than my car because I'm not allowed to go a certain miles per hour, and they're passing me, and they're all over the place. It's like a zigzag. It's like the wild, wild west of bicyclists. I remember almost getting hit by a bike just recently. I was in Park Slope. I'm going into my car. I just went to a flea market over there. And as I'm going into the car, there's this guy on a city bike, no less, of course, going down the block, looking at his phone as his head is down. I said, "Hey, watch it." And he looks up and then he decides to not hit me. How nice of him. What would you do to rein in the wild, wild west of bicyclists? Nelson?
Well, if you notice, Comrade Bill de Blasio, you mentioned Park Slope, the dope from Park Slope,
Yep.
proposed having Pee Wee Herman and the guys and gals on bicycles to have a license plate.
Yes.
Now, you know why he wants to put license plates on bicycles, so that the speed cameras, the red light cameras, can clip them too. That's a hidden tax, a hidden fee. Oofa to that. I say no. Now, bicycle lanes. I bifurcated. I've been in some neighborhoods like Northern Queens, Northern Brooklyn, lots of hipsters, millennials. They love their bicycles and they use the bicycle lanes. Then you go to where I go on the weekends, on Sundays, to have visitation with my 2 youngest sons, Carter and Hunter, Queens Boulevard.
Mhm.
And one day, it was hot in the summer, and I said, we're going to sit on the bicycle lane on Queens Boulevard, and I'm going to teach them the game that I grew up with, Skelly. You know,
Oh,
we
yeah.
throw the
Yeah,
box.
wax. Yeah, wax.
I had the bottle caps, and
Yeah.
I'm teaching them Skelly. For an hour, we're playing Skelly. Not one bicycle came by. So I know that Corey Johnson and Eric Adams and everyone said, and de Blasio, it's almost like Bugsy Siegel. Build the bicycle lanes and they will come.
Right.
That's not always the case. So I would say you either use it or lose it.
Mhm.
So if you look at a bicycle lane that's been in existence already, let's say I'm sworn in as mayor, and it hasn't been used, tough noogies, it reverts. We repurpose it to the old use because a lot of stores are now without parking in commercial areas. It's hurt the mom and pop shops. But if you're using it, and there are neighborhoods that are very proactive with their bicycles, then you get to keep it. In terms of the speed cameras, only around schools. But I think we have to follow what happened in New Jersey and Nassau County, where they had the red light cameras and they eliminated it.
Right.
I can see near the schools because when I was a young Huckleberry, school bell would ring at PS 114 in Canarsie, Bilderseat Junior High School, and we'd be running wild in the streets.
Running the hell out of there, yeah.
Right. So in those areas, or where there's a preponderance of senior citizens, you know, like Crossing, some of these, like Queens Boulevard that I mentioned, Eastern Parkway, some of these thoroughfares have been like thoroughfares of death.
Yeah.
So there you might want to put them where you could actually make the case that they're protecting life and limb and preventing accidents. But in most instances, I've seen they create accidents because people just put the jam. You know, you get the app, 500 yards as a speed cap, and everybody.
I know. It's true. And
I got to tell you, being on Woodhaven Boulevard, I took a shortcut from LIE. I had to be in Brooklyn and 3rd Avenue for a fundraiser. I said, we're backed up. Let's take Woodhaven Boulevard to the belt. We're crawling. The speed limit is down to 30, and then all the red light cameras. And then Highland Boulevard, no, 25. And Highland Boulevard in Staten Island the other day, I had to get somewhere. We're crawling. Speed limit's down to 30, and they got all kinds of construction, and never mind the potholes, and then they scrape the asphalt, and they don't repave it for a month of Sunday, so all the chop shops are making big money because you need the undercarriage redone, you know, wheel alignments and all that. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Why is it that when I'm on the Belt Parkway or anywhere really, the Ocean Parkway could be, why is it so hard for the city to provide paint for the lanes? Why do I have to guess a lane sometimes, especially when it's raining and you really can't see the asphalt? I mean,
well, you know, let me be the Weisenheimer here, because we need to paint Black Lives Matter down on that asphalt.
Well, you know, you got to use the paint, I guess.
Yeah, 2 coats, 3 coats, 4 coats. No, you're right. You're right. And Department of Transportation, you talk about gold bricks, slackers, and deadbeats. I mean, unbelievable. You know, those crews need to be out there at night, not during the day, because in the day, they're just adding to the traffic menace. All of those repairs, everything that we talk about in reference to that, it needs to be done once it's off peak hours, not during the day unless it's an emergency situation.
Right. And as mayor, I would assume you would crack down on the bicyclists that decide to go the wrong way, you know, going on the sidewalk. You would get them to get more tickets, I would hope.
Yeah, look, you have traffic agents. If you notice, many of the men and women are immigrants from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. They're under the supervision of the NYPD. They need to be under the supervision of the NYPD because when they were brownies, remember, they would get beat down.
Yep.
People would spit at them, abuse them. Now, at least the cops protect them. But you notice City Hall, they don't want them doing enforcement of that capacity. You have to forget the cameras.
Right.
Let the people do the enforcement. Let the cops do the enforcement. That's what they're there for.
Right. Absolutely. Larry, do we have any quick questions that we did not touch upon in the chat section before we let Curtis leave us tonight?
That's a question, and we sort of covered when you were talking about some education, but critical race theory in education and public offices, how would you address that?
Oh, very simple. You know what critical race theory is about. It's like they want to drum into the minds of a white child that they are children of privilege, that they need to buck and bow and take a knee. Nonsense. Now, as you evolve in the educational school system, we need to teach the children in the elementary school the basics about the history of America, good and bad. There's been a lot of bad stuff, but there's been a lot of great stuff.
Right.
Give them the basics first. Then as they go on, junior high school, and especially high school or college, you expose them to other theories. I love intellectual debate and discussion. You want to debate 1619 versus the way we were trained about the birth of America and how we came about to be the world's greatest country? Perfect. That's the place to do it. But not in elementary school, not in junior high school, and certainly not in high school, because number one, they're not even teaching history to begin with. Right. So give a child an opportunity to have the basics first. And then they can go on to these other parallels of different points of view, which I think are very important. Remember, I want more free speech. So if you believe in that, you have an opportunity at free speech, but you also have to be able to sit there and have forensic debate, civil discussions about your differences, not the cancel culture that exists now that says, no, you can't speak about your point of view because your white privilege doesn't permit you to have a place any longer at the table. That's nonsense. That's ridiculous. And Asians are beginning to see that they're no longer a minority. They're people of privilege also. So what happened? I thought they were minorities. No, they're doing too good. You know, they're actually they're improving the way you should academically. So guess what? Sit with the whiteys over there because you're not entitled to a discussion. This is absolutely mind-boggling nuts.
And especially in the college campuses, I mean, that used to be a place for debate.
Yes.
People used to have different theories and debate and, civilly, disagree, whatever. But now it's like you say, the cancel culture, you're automatically a racist. Give me a break. I mean, we should all remember that we're all one. At the end of the day, we're all New Yorkers. We're all Americans. And we want the best for all races because they are living in our communities. Okay? Why would we want a race to fail? Why would we want, because if they fail, we fail as a unit. We fail as a city. We look at Detroit, look at Philadelphia, look at all these other places that are run by 100% Democrat rule. They're cesspools. They're failing. The buildings are decaying. We are getting to that point where New York City, the financial capital of the world, is starting to decay. We need leadership to bring us back. And I believe that has to be from the Republican Party because this state and city is controlled 100% by the Democrat Party, and they're rotting us to the core.
Well, let me add, in addition to that, you may have seen Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo in his act of vengeance and revenge against the Working Families Party. Obliterate third parties, obliterate it. Now there's only the Conservative Party, Working Families Party. That means the Libertarian Party no longer has on-ballot status. The party I used to be chairman of, Reform Party, no longer with on-ballot status. The Green Party, all these other parties that had a place at the table, although obviously they didn't have the enrollment of the Democrats or the Republicans. I want different points of view to be heard. Just like in the Republican Party. Remember when the Tea Party came about, the establishment Republicans, the country club Republicans, basically wanted to cancel out what the Tea Party was saying. Why? Let there be open and free discussion. Agree to disagree. And on issues in which you have a similar point of view, you come together in solidarity. On other issues, you continue the debate.
Correct.
And then obviously you just determine what the direction you're going to take based on the directions internally in the party, or maybe you decide to go third party or independent. I'm a big believer in initiative and referendum. I trust people. I do not trust politicians. And if I'm elected mayor, don't trust me either. Hold my feet and hands to the fire. There's one thing we know. Politicians, when their back is against the wall, will deny that the problem exists, ignore it, and then delay doing anything about it. So remember what Curtis Sliwa said when he's mayor. He said, hey, remember DID, pal? Well, you're in that box right now, and we're going to stick your feet and your hands to the fire.
Well, thank you, Curtis.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, you give a good lead in. Joe Diamond actually has a little bit more to say about different political lines. Joe, go ahead.
Hey guys, and if you hear my cat screaming in the background, that's very appropriate because all right. So Curtis mentioned he wants to institute no-kill shelters. I don't know if you mentioned this before I came on, but the petition drive to get you on the animal welfare line. Curtis, you didn't have a chance to mention that, did you?
No, you're correct. Actually, there are two lines we're soliciting for now, petitions, because we know that in this city, there are some people like my own parents, my father Chester and my mother Francesca, no longer here. They weren't even Reagan Democrats or Giuliani Democrats. They were like hardcore Democrats. They will never vote for a Republican. And there's still quite a few people there. But if they have an alternative line, like right now, we're circulating petitions for the independent line. It's what it's called, independent, because there's a growing number of independents out there. In fact, you look at the registration of younger people. They're more independents registering than actually party registrations for Democrats or Republicans. And then there's the animal welfare line that you, Joe, mentioned, which has one issue alone, no kill shelters. And so I'll have an opportunity to run on 3 separate lines in the general election. That will give that will give independents and moderate Democrats an opportunity potentially to vote for me against the Democrat, because they won't feel like, oh, they have to vote for Curtis as a Republican, which some will feel is like a sin against their family's tradition or whatever block they have in their mindset. But you got to have those multiple lines.
Right. Now, what would the process be for that? What's time frame on getting, and how many signatures you would probably need to get those lines?
Well, you need for mayor 3,750 signatures to qualify those. So you better double the number because, for instance, let's turn it back to the Republican petitioning drive. I know you had Fernando on. I don't know if he mentioned how he knocked off Sarah Tershwell on the ballot, who should have been running for mayor along with Fernando and me. She was the first to announce. She raised twice as much money as we did collectively. And he had his minions knock her off the ballot on technicalities in the middle of a pandemic. Are you out of your mind? Let everybody run. John Tobacco knocked off the ballot. 17,000 signatures in a pandemic. How do I know he had 17,000? Because he and I were on the same petitions, Republican petition. My cover sheet, thank God, was okay. He had 1 or 2 little problems on the cover sheet. They knocked him off the ballot. Who? Mateo and his minions. Now, this cannot be tolerated. The Democrats, with all their infighting between DSA and establishment Democrats, they almost had no challenges against one another at the Board of Elections. I was proud to stand on Sunday on the steps of Queensborough Hall with Joe Concannon, Phil Orenstein, and the Queens County Republican Patriots. 32 of them were knocked off the ballot by Mateo's thugs. 32. And thankfully, they were restored to the ballot, but they're still being tortured in the court process. It's cost them $65,000 in legal fees. We need to be like Florida. You pay some money or you get some signatures and everybody gets to run. What are people afraid of? Let's have primaries. Let's have choice. But when the Board of Elections becomes a place where you just knock people off on the line, we are the most arcane state and city in the nation. We talk about Georgia. Georgia is a paradise compared to our election process of Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo and the Democratic machine in New York City. And shame on Republicans who sided with Mateo and his supporters to knock off Sarah Tershwell, John Tobacco, and 32 who are running for various levels of office in Queens. That's a disgrace.
Look, at the end of the day, I agree with you on the signature process. It's archaic. I've been getting signatures because I'm the Republican district leader of the 44th Assembly District, also in conjunction with being president of the Brooklyn Tea Party. For years, I've been getting signatures, going door to door, knocking on people's doors. Half the people are dead, moved, or when you finally find a living soul that actually answers the door, and you ask them, could you please sign the petition? I have a Republican candidate running for office. They say, could you come back later? Or no, go away. And you're like, oh my God, finally, I found a living soul after going up and down stairs for an hour or whatever. And I finally, out of the 30 names, found one living soul. This needs to be reformed. This has to be reformed. You mentioned about what Florida does. I think that's a great idea. We need to reform our system, because it is such an archaic process. This is not the 19th century anymore. People
and what are we afraid of? To let men and women run for political office? I don't care if there's 38 candidates for an assemblyman district. Let them all be heard. Let them go knocking on doors. Let them try to convince the voters. This is what America is about. Absolutely. But to deny them an opportunity to run because of a signature, hey, you got the wrong ED.
Yeah.
Hey, freak you and your Board of Elections too. That's all that does is maintain the status quo. And that's got to be changed. That's got to be changed.
It has to be reformed. It's very disgusting the way this process has been going for years, and I'm glad someone is actually talking about that. So,
Glenn,
yes, go ahead.
so with the animal welfare line, so I think the petition drive ends the end of this week. So
Okay.
we're trying to get enough signatures for that. If anybody can help, so we have a Facebook group, Animal Lovers for Curtis Sliwa, and it's the number 4, Animal Lovers for Curtis Sliwa. In Facebook, if you could sign up like in that group, we'll get you petitions.
Okay, if you could post that on the Brooklyn Tea Party Facebook page. We have a couple
Okay.
Facebook pages. It's the one with the waving flags. That'll be the main one that you can
Okay.
post it on. Are you a member of that page already?
I believe I am. but I will-
Okay, if you are, just, well, that one, we have it blocked off where we can't just post something. So do me a favor. I'm not sure if we're Facebook friends. If you are, I'm also the administrator of Brooklyn Republicans Facebook page. So post that on the Brooklyn Republicans page, and I'll forward that to the Brooklyn Tea Party page and the
Okay.
other pages. So that way, for those who would like to participate of our membership to help Curtis out in those particular petition lines, they could help him out in that manner. So
Excellent.
please do it there, and I'll forward it to the rest. Thank you, Curtis. On behalf of the Brooklyn Tea Party, for those of you who are just joining in, I'm Glenn Nocera. I'm president of the Brooklyn Tea Party. I wanted to thank Curtis for all his hard work he has done for the city of New York from the beginning of the inception from 1979 when I was 4. So I just want to thank you because you are you're the epitome of what New York is about. You know, you have gumption, you have street savviness, and we like that. We like when people fight for a cause and get out there and put themselves out there. It's very important. Like I ran for public office 3 times. I know the struggles of just getting on the ballot and whatnot. And I commend you for stepping up to the plate, of all the candidates for stepping up to the plate to get their ideas out there, and especially running on the Republican line. We need more diversity, more opinion of thought on our party to show that we are a big tent. We might not agree on all issues, and that's fine. But the core issues, if we agree on the core issues, we should all band together. Whoever wins the primary on June 22nd, you mentioned you would support Fernando if he winds up winning. I would hope he does the same if you win, because at the end of the day, we need all to be together. We need to stop the scourge of the Democrats, what they have done to our city. The immigrant population, they know what has been happening. They've been seeing. They're business owners. They see what the city has done to business owners. They're deteriorating our city to hell. So I wanted to thank you personally for all the hard work you have done in fighting for street justice for the city of New York. Thank you.
And thank you to the Tea Party for maintaining yourself, because, you know, in many eras, a movement comes and then a movement goes. And let's face it, there are many Republicans who had hoped that they could have put Preparation H on you and you would dry up and just blow away. So thanks for maintaining the principles that I learned about on the Mark Levin Show.
Thank you so much, Curtis. With that being said, I want to say God bless you on your trip tomorrow for that 24 hours. I hope you,
Belly of the beast.
Curtis, how are you going to go to the bathroom? How's
That's what I said in the New York Post article, which is already online. I said, hey, it's not thugs, you know, because I'll run across a series of thugs that I'm concerned about. It's finding bathrooms. Now, I know where a few of them are open and they're maintained. But to be honest with you, man, you got to travel forever to find a workable bathroom, which is, you go to Europe, they have men and female room attendants. The public bathrooms are amazing. You put a quarter in, they are self-cleaning. Look, we're like a third world country. We don't even provide basic lavatories. It used to be Starbucks. Remember the owner, the guy who created it came out of the Bayview projects in Canarsie, and he used to let people come in, and then they started to crack down on that. Where you gonna go? You gotta buy, remember, a cheeseburger special and a diner in order to use the bathroom. That's crazy.
Wait, Jack Bauer never used a bathroom. Curtis Sliwa never uses a bathroom.
Yeah, you're right.
It's only 24 hours, guys. Come on.
Yep, yep.
Well, Curtis, thank you. And you know, thank you for your generous time that you provided us tonight. I think we covered a lot of questions tonight, and we do appreciate your candidness of answering these questions, and we do appreciate that. And I just wanted to say God bless you, and especially with the animals, what you do. That's very beautiful thing you do with you and your wife. So God
Well,
bless you.
let's just remind all the Republicans out there is a primary. They don't even know that because of the tsunami of Democratic information. So
Everything
we need Republicans to get out and vote, no matter who they vote for in the Republican primary. Just get them to get out and vote, whether it's paper ballot, early 9-day early voting, the day of polling. We got to get them out.
Right. Amen to that. Thank you again for everyone for joining us tonight at the Brooklyn Tea Party Zoom meeting with our special guest, Curtis Sliwa, the head of the Guardian Angels and mayor candidate for New York City. God bless you all for joining us tonight. I want to wish you all a beautiful night. So good night all until we meet again.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. Good night. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.